and really tries to welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that takes the complex operating manuals of the universe and really tries to translate them into actionable knowledge for you.
Exactly.
And today, we're not just summarizing research. I think we're really undertaking a paradigm shift.
That's the right word for it. Because if you, like most people, define yourself by your physical hardware, your body, your brain, your measurable inputs, you're basically operating with an outdated system manual.
Right.
We're moving past these models where the mind creates reality and diving deep into a framework where reality is a governed system, one that's meticulously designed for our cognitive development.
Exactly. It's a shift from seeing consciousness and reality as this, you know, philosophical mystery into understanding it as a technical system.
Mm,
You follow the sources. The universe isn't some random chaotic place.
not at all.
It's a highly optimized, perfectly calibrated environment.
And our mission today is really to introduce the foundational lexicon, the operational guide for what we're calling the NAF-centric universe, or NCU. We're going to define the NAFs, your persistent cognitive essence, and show you how it lives on this eternal, expanding network of ANFIS.
And this is the core of it right here. Concepts like change, healing, or gaining insight. They aren't based on some vague spirituality.
No, not at all. They are defined high-fidelity governance protocols. We're essentially providing you with a technical manual. It details mandatory operational procedures like structured focus or salat and purified knowledge transfer, zakat, for maximizing your cognitive potential.
So the goal for you listening is to stop seeing your life as just this series of random events
Hmm.
and start to recognize it as a perfectly structured learning game and one that's governed by very precise rules. We want you to walk away from this with the actual terms you need to operate within this new paradigm.
Let's unpack this architecture, starting with the essence itself.
So let's begin at the very beginning. What is the fundamental component of this entire system? We really need to clearly define the NAFs and establish its sovereignty over the physical body,
Right, and we have to be super clear on this from the get-go. The NAFs is the persistent cognitive essence, and this is the non-negotiable definition.
the bottom line.
The bottom line, it is not the body or the brain. The NAFS is the permanent operator. It's the agent that's endowed with free will, with decision-making capabilities, and, importantly, inherent biases.
So if you're thinking of it like a video game, the NAFs is the player in the chair.
Exactly. The player in the chair and the physical body is just the avatar on the screen.
That immediately reframes the entire universe then. It gives it a singular function. If the NAFs is the core essence, then the cosmos must be its training ground.
Precisely. The sources are definitive on this. The sole purpose of the entire universe is the cognitive development or pseudodibble of the NAFs. So this universe, it's not a place of random creation.
It's a school.
It's a specialized, high-stakes learning environment. And the NAFS starts as what's referred to as a blank slate, or an uncut diamond, just waiting to be polished.
Okay, so when we talk about diamond, what we really mean are the challenges, the stress, the failures, basically the friction of life.
Mm-hmm.
How is that friction managed to make sure that the learning environment is actually fair and conducive to growth instead of just being, destructive?
This is where we have to introduce the accountability policy. This is the absolute foundation of the NCU's fairness doctrine.
Okay.
The policy, and it's derived from the core governance terms, guarantees that the system is perfectly calibrated. It states explicitly that Allah does not burden a nafs beyond its designated capacity, its wusaha.
That's a massive guarantee. I mean, that means that every single challenge you face is, I guess, mathematically survivable if you use the correct protocol.
Absolutely. Think of wusaha as your guaranteed bandwidth. The system is literally incapable of assigning you a task that exceeds your available resources or error.
Your processing power. Like, you can't be given a problem you literally don't have the hardware to solve.
Precisely. That's the guarantee. This policy establishes a defined field of play where your cognitive and operational responsibilities are perfectly matched to your innate capacity. You get credited for the good you earn through disciplined choice, and you're debited for the ill you earn through misalignment. This is the definition of security, of Iman. Knowing the system won't crash on you because of an overload.
So if the NAFS is persistent and eternal, and our development is the goal, how does this essence exist outside of our individual physical lives? You mentioned it's part of a massive shared structure.
That structure is the network of ANFIS. ANFIS is just the plural of NAFs. All NUFUs are connected on this massive, expanding network where knowledge, refined cognitive schemas, and experiential data are continuously shared, We are not isolated cognitive islands.
And the sources mention this fascinating detail, that the size of the physical universe is intrinsically tied to the size of this network.
That's a crucial insight. The number of human beings is always increasing, and so the network of ANFIS is actively expanding as a foundational component of the universe itself.
So the universe isn't just a static background.
No, not at all. It's an ever-growing computational structure that's accommodating the learning needs of these increasing nodes. And this learning is permanent. The NAFS never disappears after physical death. It just continues its learning in a more developed state, carrying forward all the knowledge, all the biases, and all the polished facets it gained during its time in the apparition.
Let's track this back to the start of an individual life then. The initiation of a new NAFS, that connection protocol. It must be highly specific. How does a new NAFS get initiated and, connected to this massive existing network?
The process starts when Allah initiates existence from the biological component, right? The zygote, the inseminated ovum, and sperm.
Right.
Time passes, and the first textual mention of the nafs's presence is identified by the term alakhla.
Which translates to something hooked up, which suggests a connection, not something that just emerges organically.
Exactly. Alaka signifies the initiation of a brand new nafs connecting to the massive network of Anfis. This is the moment the consciousness operator gets plugged in. And the very first vital connection is established immediately between the new nafs and the nafs of its mother.
Wow. So even before the physical brain is fully formed, the cognitive essence is already linked to the mother's essence on the network.
And that connection is immediate. It's instantaneous because it isn't relying on, slow physical neurotransmitters. Information is shared instantly across this cognitive space.
Okay.
Then post-birth, the connections just rapidly expand. Father, siblings, friends, teachers, and eventually a spouse. Every meaningful relationship creates a new high-bandwidth link on the network.
This architecture immediately explains phenomena that rational thinking just dismisses as pseudoscience. Things like ESP, extrasensory perception. We always hear those stories of a mother just sensing when their child is in danger, even miles away.
That kind of instantaneous transfer, which is totally inexplicable from a purely material perspective, is just NAFs to NAFs communication happening on the network. It's not extrasensory at all.
It's essential sensory.
It's essential sensory. It's a fundamental feature of the architecture that allows for knowledge transfer and emotional resonance across different nodes.
This brings us to one of the most provocative stances in this framework, which is the anti-neuroscience stance on knowledge. If knowledge isn't stored in the brain, where is it? And how does this just completely challenge mainstream understanding?
Well, neuroscience operates on the assumption that the brain generates consciousness and stores memory synaptically. We're stating the exact opposite. If the brain is merely the temporary apparition, the interface, it cannot possibly be the permanent storage unit.
Right.
All knowledge resides in the NAFs and is maintained on the network. The brain is just the access point.
Okay, wait, I have to challenge that because the listener is definitely thinking. If the brain is just an apparition, why does a severe stroke or physical trauma to the brain erase lifelong memories or completely change a personality? Isn't that proof the memory is in the physical hardware?
That is the perfect question, and it forces us to clarify the concept of the governed access protocol. A severe stroke doesn't erase the memory.
It doesn't.
No. It destroys the interface's ability to access the data. Think of the brain as a hard drive reader that's attached to a massive cloud storage system. That's the NAFs. If you smash the reader with a hammer...
It can't access the files.
Right. You can't access the files, but the files themselves remain completely intact in the cloud.
So physical damage to the brain causes a systemic failure in the access protocol, but the essence itself, the NAFs, remains whole and knowledgeable.
Exactly. And to really drive this point home, just consider the rapid turnover of our physical cells. The cells on your tongue, for example, are replaced approximately every 10 days.
Every 10 days, a new tongue.
Basically, yeah. Yet, you retain your taste preferences, your food memories, your language skills for an entire lifetime. If memory resided in those short-lived cells, you would become a completely new person every few weeks. This persistence confirms that memory is a governed access protocol to the NAFS's persistent cognitive schema. It's ISM. It's not storage in the physical hardware alone.
That clarification is absolutely vital. Okay, before we move on to the apparition itself, let's quickly define two other essential operational entities, Ruh and Malaika. These are often mistranslated, but in the governance framework, they have very technical roles.
They do. Ruh is defined not as a spirit in the vague sense, but as the divine message or messenger. It's the raw guidance provided by Allah. Think of Ru as the essential data packet, the instruction set.
The code. And Malika, often translated as angels. Were they the hardware or the software?
They are the functional operators. The Malaika are the operational entities agents of Allah's governance, whose primary role is to execute commands and bring the divine message. They're the ones who ensure the nafs receives the necessary guidance and that the established order, the deen, is maintained.
Okay, so what's the chain of command here? Does the Ru just sort of appear?
Yeah.
Or does the Malaika carry the Ru?
So Malaika execute the commands that are derived from the Ru. The Ru is the code. The Malaika are the executing agents. They are responsible for execution and navigation within the cosmic system, making sure that when a nafs requires a piece of guidance or faces a precisely calibrated challenge within its wusaha, the agent arrives to implement the relevant physical or cognitive instruction set.
So they bridge the gap between the divine message and its physical implementation in our world in the apparition.
That's it, exactly.
All right, so if the nafs is the permanent operator, our body is the temporary machine. Let's delve into this concept of the body and brain as the apparition interface.
The body and brain are an apparition, a governed biological interface that the nafs temporarily attaches to during consciousness. It's a highly sophisticated organic suit, really, designed for experiential learning in this physical domain.
So the brain's role is not to generate consciousness.
No, its role is to translate the nafs' cognitive commands into physical reality and sensory inputs.
Which means the entire physical reality we perceive is actually a highly curated, localized reflection of the underlying governance system interacting with our nafs.
Precisely. And we see physical proof of this temporary attachment whenever that connection experiences interference or disconnects. When an individual is unconscious, in deep sleep, a coma, or suffering from a severe mental disorder that causes a profound detachment from a shared reality, there's a slight temporary detachment from the nafs.
You use a technical analogy to describe this data disconnection. Let's talk about that wire analogy.
Right. Think of the nafs as the central server and the brain as the local modem. If you're unconscious or in a coma, the physical connection line, the wire between the nafs and the apparition, it remains, but there's no energy on the wire.
Oh, okay.
The body is still alive, it's performing its maintenance functions, but the operator, the full consciousness, is offline. You're without conscious control or sensory translation.
And what happens when the person wakes up or recovers?
The energy comes back instantly. The nafs is, again, fully operating the interface. The key insight here is that the physical brain can temporarily disconnect from the full processing power of the nafs under stress or sleep, but the nafs itself, which has persisted on the network, is unharmed and ready to resume operations exactly where it left off.
This reframing is so critical when we look at brain science, neuroplasticity, for instance. The brain's ability to reorganize itself is often touted by, rational thinking as proof of the brain's independent creative power. How does the NCU model recontextualize that?
Well, rational thinking views neuroplasticity as just random biological adaptation based on external stimulus. In the governance framework, it's understood as the apparition, the brain undergoing recalibration by Allah. And this recalibration is specifically driven by nafs command updates.
Can you give us a concrete example of that kind of intentionality?
Sure. If a nafs makes a disciplined choice to learn a new complex skill, let's say playing the guitar, it issues a sustained command. That commitment, that focused choice of the nafs, requires a corresponding physical change in the apparition to execute the command efficiently.
So the brain has to adapt.
The governance system then updates the biological interface, strengthening neural pathways, even altering the brain structure to accommodate the nafs' new skill command. The nafs is the architect, the brain is the constantly updating construction site.
Okay, now let's move to the control center, the actual console where the nafs dictates its reality experience. This brings us to the locus coeruleus, or LC.
The locus coeruleus, a tiny nucleus in the brainstem, is the physiological component that acts as the reality highlighting console. It's the main source of norepinephrine in the brain, which is vital for regulating attention, vigilance, and stress response. Its job is essentially to be a high-speed filter.
Why is this one tiny area considered the console? How does it execute the nafs' commands to shape what we actually perceive?
Because it's the physical nexus where cognitive intent meets sensory input filtration. The LC determines what is important, what gets highlighted, and what gets suppressed. And the ultimate proof of the nafs' active governing role in shaping our perceived reality is demonstrated through what we call the Toyota Tundra effect.
Okay, walk us through the Toyota Tundra effect in detail, connected directly to reality selection.
Okay. Imagine you decide to purchase a very specific, somewhat rare vehicle. Let's use the Toyota Tundra. You've been driving for years and you've never really noticed them.
Right.
The moment you commit to buying one, suddenly you see that specific truck model everywhere. It's on every street corner, every billboard. This isn't a coincidence.
So it's not that there are more of them.
No. The NAPS has programmed the LC to amplify, to highlight that specific potential physical reality from the superposition of all possibilities.
So the reality of Toyota Tundras on the road always existed, but my NAFs made the executive decision to make that specific reality visible and salient to my interface.
Precisely. You are consciously or unconsciously selecting paths in cognitive harmony with your NAS's current commands. If your default command is based on fear or lack or threat, the LC diligently amplifies those specific signals, making you perceive a world full of danger and scarcity. This is the physiological mechanism behind confirmation bias, just recontextualized as a governance function.
So the conclusion then is radically clear.
Yeah.
Your focus doesn't just find reality. It governs which aspects of reality become visible to you.
That is the core operational principle of the LC governance protocol. You are sovereign over your console's operations. If the NAFS issues a clear, stable command of trust of tawakkul and focus, salat, the LC recalibrates to amplify opportunities and necessary resources, overriding the default anxiety-based programming.
This framework completely changes how we approach mental health. Traditional issues are now reframed as governance misalignments. Let's look at ADHD through this technical lens.
Well, a traditional diagnosis views ADHD as a chemical imbalance or maybe a behavioral deficit. The governance reality defines it as a NAFS command flickering, causing LC console instability.
Command flickering.
The operator, the NAFS, is attempting to issue multiple, often contradictory commands at the same time, or it can't sustain a single focus command. This instability overloads the reality highlighting console, which leads to what we perceive as distractibility.
So the focus isn't on medicating the console, but on stabilizing the operator's input. How does the LC calibration protocol address this instability using the governance tools?
The treatment is command stabilization. And this is achieved using Salat repetition-structured focus and zikr, which is the methodical study of Quranic stories and parables. These protocols force the NAFs into a sustained, disciplined, singular cognitive mode.
And that stabilizes the console.
This repetition stabilizes the norepinephrine governance, allowing the NAFs to issue clear, consistent commands. It overrides the flicker and brings the LC back into stable operational parameters.
And what about the widespread issue of worry or chronic anxiety? You referred to this earlier as some kind of systemic flag.
Anxiety is redefined as a shaitanic blockage alert. It's a system diagnostic flag that signals a critical gap in tawakkul and trust. Iblis, the internal bias, which we'll detail later, generates a false projection of the future to induce despair and cognitive paralysis.
Okay.
Anxiety is the physiological manifestation of the NAFs, believing it has full control over the outcome of the future, which is a fundamental violation of governance.
So the moment we feel that intense anxiety, then the required action is an immediate operational command update, not prolonged rumination.
Exactly. The action required is immediate structured focus, salat, to realign the worldview, the arsh, with the correct governance. The rule of Ayman, of safety, is that fear and anxiety only exist when the governance connection is unstable. The task is to realign the nafs to recognize Allah as the governor, overriding the Iblis simulation of failure and reestablishing tawakkul.
Okay, we have defined the essence, the nafs, and the interface, the apparition, and the LC. Now we turn to the mandatory operational protocols for development. If this universe is school, we need the curriculum and the tools for growth. And these tools form the core of the ADGE equation, the absolute divine governance equation.
The NAFS learns and grows using two primary operational protocols, which are the essential implications of successful governance, salat and zakat. We have to move beyond the common sort of cultural definitions of these terms and understand their technical cognitive functions.
Let's start with the first one then, salat, which you've defined as structured focus or even a programming language. Why is focus mandatory for development in this system?
Salat is the mandatory cognitive action required to generate the thermal energy that's necessary to sear the divine governance into the cognitive schema, the ISM.
Sear it in.
Yes, this transforms passive learning into active searing. If you just read a truth, for example, the truth of the accountability policy, the wusaha, it remains intellectual knowledge, it's Q. It only becomes permanent operational truth, al-haq, when the nafs focuses intensely and repetitively enough to sear it into its core operating system.
That sounds like mental fire.
Yep.
Why is this searing necessary? Why can't we just intellectually accept a truth?
Because the nafs is currently running faulty internal programming. We call this Iblis wiring. We have inherited biases and predilections that actively contradict the governance protocols, like believing we are the ultimate cause of our own success or failure. So to learn a new governance protocol, for example, Allah is the ultimate provider, the nafs has to focus on that truth until it generates enough thermal energy to override the old faulty wiring. Without this disciplined, structured focus, there is no searing. There is only temporary, malleable clay that just reverts back to the default Iblis settings. Salah is literally the programming language used to update the nafs's interface.
And the second tool is zakat, purified knowledge transfer. This takes charity out of the realm of just, material obligation and places it squarely in the cognitive architecture of the network.
Absolutely. Zakat is defined as the purified, effective transfer of knowledge within the network of ANFIS. It's the operational workflow for governance execution, and it's the primary way the NAFS helps others develop. When you gain a profound operational insight, a truth that has been seared into your ISM, and you share that knowledge effectively and without ego, you are performing zakat.
So how does this contribute to that ADGE equation and the development of the whole network?
Well, the network development coefficient is directly enhanced through the successful interaction of nufus and the effective transfer of that knowledge. By transferring knowledge that has been purified by governance protocols, you are optimizing the collective cognitive evolution of the entire network.
So giving material goods is temporary.
Right. If you just give material goods, that's temporary al-Q. If you transfer refined, applicable knowledge, you are contributing permanent al-Haq to the network, and your own nafs is credited for the resultant development of the other node.
Let's pivot to a really practical application of this, the dual healing protocol. A lot of people today practice intense visualization or mental rehearsal to try to change their brain physiologically, believing their mind creates the change. How does the governed nafs approach healing without committing what you call the kernel-level corruption, or shirk?
The modern manifestation movement often commits shirk, which is attributing absolute creative power to the apparition, believing the mind or the brain alone is the source of creative power. This violates the sovereignty of the governor, so the NAFS has to operate using a dual protocol to avoid this violation.
What are the two protocols?
First is the internal protocol. The NAFS executes the highest form of Salat structured focus, which includes that intense mental rehearsal or visualization, to issue the perfect command for healing. The NAFS takes full responsibility for this precise action.
Okay.
Second, the external protocol. The NAFS uses the best available apparition tools, a hospital, medical science, nutrition, but then it performs Islam, which means ceding authority by ceding the ultimate result, the healing, entirely to Allah.
Let's unpack that ceding authority concept. Give us a metaphor the listener can really grasp. If I'm a developer and the universe is the operating system, what does ceding the result look like?
Okay. Ceding authority is like a highly disciplined software developer writing a perfect, optimized piece of code. That's the internal protocol, the mental rehearsal.
Right. They then upload that code to the global cloud infrastructure, and they hit execute, fully trusting the cloud provider, the governor, to handle the scaling, the execution, and the final materialization of the result. The developer did their job perfectly, but they did not attribute the massive global creative power of the infrastructure to their own local machine.
So the NAFS performs the action, the Salat command, but recognizes that the materialization in the apparition, the actual healing of the cells, is entirely due to the governor.
Exactly. The NAFS earns the healing through disciplined, focused action, but Allah materializes the apparition. This prevents the ultimate violation of shirk. The lesson learned, the memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. The healing without attributing creative power to the self is iman.
Finally, we need to address the source of all the friction and error in our journey, the internal audit components, Iblis and Shaitan. This is often reduced to a simple good versus evil struggle, but in the NCU, they are defined functional parts of the system. This is one of the most critical structural distinctions to make. Iblis is internal. It represents the capacity for error, our inherent reasoning and cognitive flaws, our biases, our predilections, our susceptibility to arrogance.
It's part of our code.
It is an integral, necessary part of our NAFS architecture because it's what makes our choice for good or ill meaningful. If error wasn't possible, free will would be meaningless.
So Iblis is the internal design flaw within the diamond. What then is shaitan, which is often depicted as the adversary?
Shaitan is the polishing tool. It's the external friction or disposition designed to press specifically against the naf's flaws, against Iblis, in order to force growth. Shaitan is not an external devil trying to randomly destroy you.
No.
It is a meticulously calibrated operational entity that presents the precise temptation or blockage that will highlight your Iblis-based weakness. It's our own susceptibility to block off divine guidance, and it's strengthened by our choice to accept other systems or sources of guidance.
Therefore, the experience of difficulty, suffering, worry, and challenges is not random punishment. It's targeted development.
It is the polishing protocol. Challenges are calibrated friction, guaranteed to be within your wusaha, your capacity.
Yeah.
When friction arrives, the only successful move is to align with the polishing. If your Iblis flaw is procrastination, Shaitan will apply pressure by presenting a deadline paired with a tempting, easy distraction.
Oh.
The friction is designed specifically to test where Iblis is weakest. If you overcome it using salat, the flaw is polished. If you fail, the friction continues.
So when we feel that systemic worry, we should recognize it as a system diagnostic flag pointing directly at an Iblis-based bias.
Precisely. It signals a structural flaw. By identifying the flaw, you can anticipate where Shaitan will apply pressure. The response must be to execute salat on the friction, asking, what specific governance terminology am I supposed to learn from this challenge, which is guaranteed to be within my capacity, to override this internal Iblis flaw? The system ensures fairness, it guarantees accountability, and it provides the definitive technical structure for cognitive growth within the NCU.
This deep dive has fundamentally shifted the conversation from really philosophy to engineering.
Yeah.
We've established that your life is not a series of random cosmic accidents, but a high-stakes, perfectly calibrated learning game for your cognitive essence, the nafs.
Mm-hmm.
The question is no longer if you can change, but how you choose to operate your interface using these proven governance protocols.
And the ultimate distinction we've drawn today is between rational thinking, or RT, which provides temporary localized solutions and incomplete knowledge, voyage, and governance, which provides permanent transformation and the independent cosmic truth, al-haq.
RT patches the system.
Exactly. RT tries to patch the system. Governance focuses on permanent root cause resolution by rewriting the kernel code in the nafs.
And the key to achieving that permanent systemic change relies on what we defined as locution fluency. This is more than just using different words. It's about using the technical language of the operating system itself.
That is the core developmental imperative. You have to achieve locution fluency learning and speaking the precise technical Abrahamic governance terminology. If you use the language of RT, you're operating outside the main command line, and you're limiting your results to just temporary fixes.
Give us a concrete example of how this language choice really changes the outcome for the listener.
Okay, consider the difference between saying, I am manifesting this healing, versus I am executing the Salat protocol and ceding the result of the healing to the governor.
Very different.
Worlds apart. In the first instance, the RT1, you're using Anato-Q terminology, and you're attributing creative power to yourself, which is shirk. This leads to anxiety and instability. In the second instance, the governance one, you're using al-haq terminology. You're aligning your action with the fundamental architecture of the NCU, ensuring stability and earning the maximum result without the risk of corruption.
So the universe exists to force the nafs to learn this divine locution through direct engagement with cosmic patterns.
That's the purpose. The governance manual is open, and fluency is the ultimate developmental goal that brings your nafs into perfect alignment.
Indeed.
You were created with a blank slate nafs and the internal capacity for error, Iblis. Every time you fail to execute a protocol correctly, you're simply exhausting your gains in this life rather than making permanent deposits into your cognitive essence. Alignment is achieved only through discipline focus and the intentional use of the sovereign operating language.
So here is the provocative thought for you, our listener, to take away. You are running an apparition interface designed for your cognitive growth. What is the one Iblis-based command, that one faulty belief or bias you are currently running, that you will execute the Salat protocol on immediately to bring your naf into alignment with the sovereign governance system starting right now?